Welcome back to Judeacation here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News. We are in the JNS Media Hub in Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. I have a real legend on the program this week, Yisrael Medad, known affectionately as Winky, and we'll figure that out in a few minutes, why he got that nickname, how he got that nickname. But he's been a longtime activist for the communities in Judea and Samaria for many, many years. He has a long bio, and we're going to break them down as we go through the program. He's currently a volunteer spokesman to the foreign media and visiting groups on behalf of the residents of Judea and Samaria. He calls it the resettlement enterprise, not the settlements. That's what they call it in the international media, and those who hate the fact that Jews are living in their ancestral biblical heartland. The resettlement enterprise in Judea and Samaria. Yisrael Medad, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Privilege.
Talk about, first of all, your efforts in speaking to the foreign press and those who come visiting Israel on behalf of the communities in Judea and Samaria. It's not always easy to get our points across.
Of course it's not easy, especially when they are antagonistic, especially when they're ignorant, especially when they're purposely being fed the wrong information. It's been an honor for me to serve in the position with many other people, some of them you've had on the program. And I don't know whether you want to call it luck or the hand of God. But when I started out my Zionist activity way back when, in the 1960s, I found myself in media spokesman positions. That was when there was film, and you had to make sure you didn't make a mistake because it was not video. They couldn't cut it out and they couldn't edit it. Your mistake, you had to earn it. And I've had a little bit of practice. And with the help of other people, we've sort of fine-tuned some of the messaging, thinking about it, talking about it. I like to think that I'm part of a group of people who share information, share ideas. Will this phrase go down? What about this term? Will it go? And stuff like that. And I just wing it by myself. And I've been to Congress. I've been to Parliament in the UK. And I received groups here. Just recently, I've received 6 members of Congress who are not very happy about what I'm doing with my friends, neighbors, and family. This past week, I did the BBC. So thankfully, some people remember who I am. And in my old age, my voice is still okay. And I'm still talking to the media.
What do you think is the most effective way to get the truth out, to get the messaging out on Judea and Samaria? We're definitely the underdogs in the international media and in the phony, I would say, human rights organizations when it comes to Jewish life. What has been some of your successes? What's the most effective way to explain the reasons we are resettling the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria?
Force them to use your language is one of the things, not the first thing, but one of the things. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, talking on television with the BBC, and I kept on insisting on using the word communities. And every time he'd ask me about the settlements, I say communities. By the end of the program, he was saying, yes, what about those communities? Okay, a small victory. A second thing, of course, is to make sure you know the information. If you don't know the information, don't think you're pretty, don't think you're handsome, don't think you're smart. Be very careful about going on the media because you'll make a mistake and then thousands, if not tens of thousands or more, will get a mistake. In other words, a little bit of hubris is your worst enemy. And the third aspect is always trying to keep your answers short because they edit you. If you're going to say something important that you think is important, if you're coming back with a quick response, keep it under 10 seconds and wait. Let them talk to you. Don't offer any more information.
Do you think things can turn around one day? Using all those tips, do you think one day people will recognize our legitimate rights to be in Judea, Samaria, parts of Jerusalem? Because it's been 58 years. We just celebrated Jerusalem Day, the 58th anniversary of the liberation in a defensive war of survival, 1967. But yet the haters are still out there and the so-called settlements, I call them communities, I don't use the word settlements either, they are still on the front page of newspapers around the world, no matter what's going on. If there is a genocide, a true genocide taking place in Africa, all these things going around the world, yet the focus is on not only Israel, but specifically Judea and Samaria, the United Nations, all the, again, phony human rights organizations. One day, are we going to come out on top?
Josh, we will, but it's very difficult. Look what happened in the past 15 to 20 years. The Arabs realized that they were losing the battle, and they managed to get into academia and the media, and they changed the terms to settler colonialism. It was in the background when I was starting out, but it wasn't really up front. Genocide. All these red button words, okay, we have not come back with them, nor have we gotten our people into the media. They have. BBC, for example, has an Arabic division. They don't have an Israeli division. They don't have a Hebrew division. Sure. They have a whole Arabic division. And of course, they work in the same house down there in London, and they get together and they try to influence one another, including all these big names that you know. And so it's a battle, but I don't think we're doing that bad considering. What I do think we're doing bad is any sort of government involvement. It's horrific. It's disorganized. It's split. No responsibility, proper responsibility. No seminars. No getting together. I've always thought about the 3 C's, okay? You cooperate with like-minded people. You coordinate, making sure that everybody gets a similar message, and then you concentrate your attack, your response, your comeback. We don't have any of that. Everybody is his own star. Every government ministry is putting money the wrong way, and it's not helpful at all, whether it's Jewish Agency, whether it's Yesha Council, whether it's other organizations, NGOs. No one shares. No one wants to really get together.
In terms of the official government agencies, is this just a failure on their part, or perhaps it's more political, meaning do some of those agencies, whether it's the foreign ministry or whatnot, I don't know specifically who you're referring to, but is it because they perhaps don't believe in the Jewish right to Judea and Samaria? The Yesha Council, that's a separate entity. Obviously they do. You may disagree in terms of their methodologies, but the foreign ministry, the ministry of Hasbara, or any of these other ministries we've seen over the years, could it be that they just don't believe in the cause? They themselves are not happy about Jews living in Judea and Samaria? Maybe it gives them a headache.
I would go up to 50% to say yes, they do not believe.
Okay.
Mainly because many of these people, and this is my theory, I can't prove it, but I have a pretty good record of going over the thing. The people who control the money and the direction are Israelis. And most of them come either from formerly the foreign ministry or similar type of bureaucratic backgrounds. And they just feel that Israel should not go out there swinging, but singing. And it's not going to work. I had an interview with people you know together with a person who was literally vice deputy chairman of a very important Hasbara ministry. He gave up. Mm-hmm. He said he's talking to Israelis who have no idea what he's talking about, and he can't get any, not only budget, but even, background support, bureaucratic support for doing a few of these things like that. And we come up against the Israeli mentality that they know best. Their English is perfect, okay? They stammer over every other word, but they're out there because, as you said, politics. Politics doesn't mean the Knesset only. It means how far up I can get in my ministry. That's also politics.
Yeah, we gotta improve in that arena for sure. I want to move on to another one of your titles. You were the Director of Educational and Information Resources at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center just down the road here, and you're currently a research fellow at the center. Talk about your work in terms of Menachem Begin's legacy.
Well, I originally joined the Menachem Begin Heritage Center, I think in 2000. in charge of the educational unit by itself. And one of the first projects we managed to push was the junior Knesset. In other words, we got low-grade high school students involved in parliamentary activity, understanding how the Knesset works. In other words, not democracy as a value, as the left runs it, and therefore democracy is the highest thing, but democracy as how you run your country. It's a tool, it's an instrument, and sometimes you have to coalition build, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes you have to work behind someone's back. And sometimes you have to go to a committee. And sometimes you have to invite someone to a committee who gives you a line. That's how democracy works, okay? Another area, for example, which we had great success just as I was leaving, Beitar, the Zionist youth movement of Zev Jabotinsky of the revisionist movement, had a story at the Warsaw Ghetto and other areas during the Holocaust, basically in Poland, which was untold. Virtually unknown. There was a book out, Mornowska 7, but no one knew about it. And we began to do research, and we managed to find all sorts of locations and sites and documents. And recently, last year, we put out a 120-page booklet on the whole issue, which I contributed to. Okay, I did not do the yeoman's work, but it was part of the thing. So these areas of bringing up aspects of a movement that was shunned, that was put aside, that was either called fascist or the wrong side of the political spectrum, and therefore didn't appear in history books, didn't appear in school books, didn't appear in until Begin came to power. There were no stamps about those who ascended the gallows and were hanged by the British. All these little things that people think, oh, that's the Beitar guys playing around. All this is part. I mean. You and I think, grew up in America. Davy Crockett, the Alamo. These are things that give a little bit of spirit to an American. Akko Fortress, Shlomo Ben Yosef, all gone from the history and the educational curriculum, and I was part of that.
Very, very nice. Glad you were able to get that out to the public. I want to follow up, and I'm going to break my own rule here. Question that I don't like to ask, and I'm going to ask it anyway. If Menachem Begin were alive today, and I hate this question, but I'm going to still do it anyway. You know, because we're not prophets. We can't actually know what would Menachem Begin do today. But in terms of his leadership and the situation we are in right now here in Israel, we just passed 600 days of a war, which looks like it's going to go on for some time now, as Hamas is still standing somewhat, at least in Gaza, a war on 7 different fronts. If Begin were alive today, hate the question, but what do you think he would do different than our current leadership is doing, if you could predict?
Of course, I'd have to say that if you're asking me about Menachem Begin after several years as prime minister, if at the beginning, I think he would stumble like everybody else has stumbled, because he came from outside the establishment. He didn't know anybody in the army, didn't know anybody in the foreign ministry, no one in the defense ministry. Okay, he was a member of the Knesset Security and Defense Affairs. That was one of the great successes of the Mapai labor movement, keeping people who they did not like politically outside. And therefore, you lost the touch. If he came afterwards, first of all, unlike Netanyahu, I think he would have fired Levy immediately. The guy failed. I mean, you get another week, you get another 2 weeks, pass it over, and let's get things going.
That's the IDF chief of staff.
The IDF commander-in-chief, chief of staff. That's true. But if you talk about strategy on the ground, Begin, while he gave up, yielded Sinai, and I can explain that, but I won't because we don't have time. Gaza for him was part of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. During the negotiations for the peace agreement, he insisted that not one official Egyptian, for example, even a policeman, be stationed in the area at the time. And so I think he would have been more forceful on saying, I'm very sorry, given the situation with Hamas, let's replace it with Israel and then start all over again. If you guys are nice, maybe we'll do another disengagement. If you guys are nice, you might get autonomy. but not at this stage of the time.
Let's switch to some of your work inside the Knesset. You were a parliamentary aide to many different politicians over the years. Talk about those experiences and what you took away from them. Gula Cohen and others.
I was with Noe Blumenthal and Limor Livnat in addition. So I know what makeup is to be applied for the camera, but otherwise I didn't get involved otherwise with the female members of Knesset. Look, each one had a different style, but in the Knesset in those days, you only had one administrative parliamentary aide per member of Knesset. You had a lot to do. You had to serve as the liaison with the public. Her male, or the male, will be gender neuter, okay? Speeches, okay. Two would like a lot more help than Gula Cohen, okay? But Gula Cohen, for example, wanted facts. So I was a lot of times in the library looking up newspaper reports. I was once interviewed about this, and I said my job was to make sure she was right on the facts. Her opinions were her problem, not mine, okay? But a lot of times, there was a lot of sneaky stuff going on. Things left on the Xerox machines from another party.
Wow.
Okay? Listening in on conversations. I know this is sometimes a younger audience listening to us, but sometimes going to the bathroom, you can learn an awful lot about what two politicians are talking about. So the Knesset is a lively place. It's not stale and it's not staid. Opening up a table, as it's called, in the dining room, and listening to them shoot the breeze and stuff like that. That's part of parliamentary life. And I'll sneak in an opinion here. What the Supreme Court is doing is robbing the Knesset of what real democracy is. And it's exchange of opinion, it's argumentation, it's dealing with your ideology and politics, and not only what you can and cannot do.
This goes back to some of the issues of judicial reform back in 2022, 2023. That's what you're talking about, right?
That's what I'm talking about. And it's still with us.
Right. No, it's still going on. It hasn't been resolved. And, people still want to make change and take care of that situation which we're dealing with, in which the judiciary overuses, I would say, its power over the Knesset. Let's move on to another one of your roles. You're also an activist for the Temple Mount and the Jewish rights to the Temple Mount. Are we making progress? Are Jews able now more than ever to access the Temple Mount, to pray on the Temple Mount, to go up to the Temple Mount, whatever it is? I mean, it seems in terms of the numbers that every year the number of visitors, Jewish visitors, is increasing. Are you pleased with the progress? Are we headed in the right direction?
Let me give you an example. Okay, I first ascended the Temple Mount sometime, I think, in late September of 1970. Okay, so that goes back a while. And a short while afterwards, during that first decade that I was active in, you were advised by the people who were in the know to wear a kovetembel or a baseball cap or something, because once they saw your kippah, you had 2 or 3 policemen walking with you all the time. At that time, you could not pray at all.
Right.
Nowadays, you go up, there's mincha, there's musaf, there's hallel. You can prostrate yourself on the eastern section. For me, at my age and my experience, it's a revolution. At one point in time, they wouldn't allow only 7 Jews together in one group. Why 7? Because they might find 3 other Jews and join together for a prayer quorum. Right. All right, that's how tight the supervision was at the Temple Mount. On the other hand, we could go over all where we wanted to go. Nowadays, because of the, shall I say, ritual stringency, you go on a certain pathway to make sure, as much as possible, that no one enters areas that could be considered sacred or not, and also because of security concerns. The police don't want you to walk around completely free, and then some Waqf official or some other rab will bop you over the head. That would be more dangerous.
That's the Jordanian religious authority up on the Temple Mount, essentially monitoring Jewish behavior.
Oh,
That's
yes.
what
They're not exactly a police force,
Right.
but they're a police force minus. They've got walkie-talkies, they got uniforms, they got badges, and they go all around. They try to give orders. It's a big difference now with the current minister in charge, Mr. Ben-Gvir, but it's still not the best thing. But the short answer now is it's a totally different atmosphere. It's a totally different situation. I want to put in a word here. I don't want the activists to get over-enthusiastic about whether or not we could bring up a goat or to bring up the showbread, as we said, lechem hapanim, right, that they did in this last Shavuot holiday. To me, it looked like a football being laterally passed behind. For me, it's always been not only the most holy place, but like Yair Stern wrote, the symbol of renewed national identity and presence of the Jews in the land of Israel. It should be treated with a modicum of respect by everybody.
Let's move on to your writing work. You're a prolific writer, including here at JNS, writing op-eds on a regular basis, and you do this with other publications as well. Talk about some of your writing work. What are the topics that you focus on? What are your goals? What do you hope to do? I mean, I think you're published weekly, and including here on JNS. So talk about that.
The topics that now bother me very much is, of course, the betrayal of too many Jews in the diaspora to Zionism. It's a renewed Bundist. It's a renewed reform movement. It's a renewed, whatever you want to call it, face on people like Peter Beinart and all sorts of other people, Jewish Voice for Peace and stuff like that, that not only say, well, Israel's policies are not very good, okay, but the essence of Jewish nationalism is to be done away with. And Israel is genocidal and colonialist and racist. And it's like they're adopting the opposite of what Judaism and Jewish history has said. And since I've read a lot and I've written book reviews and articles and translations, Jabotinsky, stuff like that, I try all my articles to put in some sort of historical link, because people say, oh, really? Did that happen? And for me, that was my growing up. That was my way of doing things. I say, you don't know that? You don't know that this happened or that didn't happen and stuff like that? And I think there's a great failure both on the Jewish establishment abroad in terms of education, the Jewish agency educational department, and the I'll give you just one example and finish here. I've asked around many times. In the Israeli educational system, there is no curriculum, even a 4-chapter course on the continuum of Jewish presence in the land of Israel from the end of the Bar Kokhba revolt to the beginnings of modern Zionism. What happened in the 14th century? What happened in the 8th century? I tell the Arabs or the Arab supporters, the Arabs really never came here until 638, and they just don't believe me. But there were Jews there at the time. There were Jews there in the 1740 when the Messiah was supposed to come. So all this is missing, and it creates an empty-headed Jew, which is your worst Jew possible.
But I would argue somebody like Beinart, and he's highly educated, yet he has taken on the role of as a Jew, and then essentially devoted his entire career to bashing Israel and the Jewish people. I mean, the guy, I'm sure, has made millions of dollars being as a Jew and coming out against the state of Israel and the Jewish people. I mean, that is his whole platform. That's his whole career. That's his whole essence, his whole being. I would argue not out of a lack of education. I would argue because he's making money and he thinks he's taking a stand for humanity when in fact he is siding and essentially serving as a propaganda tool for Hamas and the other terror organizations.
I would fully agree with you and add just 2 points.
Please.
One is that he is ignorant of most of what he writes. He adopts positions that he reads. He's now on Naturi Karta. in JNS column I wrote maybe 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago. I pointed out, I caught him quoting a follower of the Satmar Rebbe blindly, without any understanding of the theocracy that goes into Satmar, which is wrong, okay? The second thing is he himself comes from, he's a third generation from people who were in the revisionist movement in South Africa. I always suspect that people like that have a psychological chip on their shoulder, that they have to prove themselves how different they were from their grandparents.
Right.
Just as a lot of our kids or other people's kids take off their kippah and do all sorts of things for a while, usually until they find out it's empty and stuff like that. And so I think it's very damaging, not only to him personally and his kids, but to the Jewish people. They are the ones who are responsible for people like Rodriguez to believe there's a genocide, to believe there should be a free Palestine, and he kills 2 people. That's blood on their hands.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. You've been in Israel since 1970, 55 years. You've seen a lot. You've gone through many, many wars, many conflicts, battles, whatever you want to call them throughout the years. Are you optimistic in terms of where we are headed now? And is this the most difficult time? I mean, there's been the second Intifada, the second Lebanon War, the first Lebanon War, the Yom Kippur War. I mean, you've seen a lot of things over the years. Is this the most difficult time? And are you optimistic for the future in terms of the state of Israel and the Jewish people?
I don't know if it's the most difficult time. I mean, if you take a look at the 48 war, just to go back, right, we lost, proportionally speaking, a lot of people. And we were really up the creek in that situation. Today's conflict is different because there's an active, a strong, not a large, but a strong, and they're strong because they're in different power locations, if I can call them, that grab the headlines and cause people to move, who are split off. I call them the Kaplan camp, okay? The people who are anti-Bibi at all costs. Mm-hmm. And it's weakening us not on the merits of the issue, okay? Netanyahu and Katz might have a wrong defense strategy or offense strategy. There are also things you can argue about, but they have made it either or. There's black and white. You can't. I mean, he lies in court. Sarah does this. It's making it so we've never had so many personal demonstrations. Breaking up, not Yair, but Avner's wedding that they're planning on has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do with ideology. Avner's not even involved in the politics. If it was Yair, okay, I can understand a little bit. In Yiddish, we have a word, farbissen. You make yourself so miserable feeling. Mm-hmm. They're doing that to themselves and doing that to the country. That's what's making the atmosphere of this current conflict so bad, in my opinion.
One more question before we wrap up, and maybe the most important one. The nickname Winky, what is the origin of it? How did you get it? And talk about where it came from and where it's going.
Well, it's really quite simple. My family name, my father's family name, going back into Galicia many years ago, was Winkleman. He was known as Winky. He was in the Army, and of course in the Army, everybody gets the American Army, 100th Bombardier Squadron, actually. And so I became Winky Jr., and it seems that our voices were very familiar. So when we picked up the phone, Winky is like, says everybody, call him Winky. I joined Beitar in 1964, and one of the first actions we had was against James Madoli, who was the National Renaissance Party head. And if no one's listening, we got into fisticuffs and other sort of non-violent activity. And everybody had to take an underground name, so when the police caught you, mm-hmm. right, they wouldn't know who you are. And I ended up taking the name Medad. I won't go into why, but that's too long a story. And when I came here, I once gave over a check, and the man said to me, listen, with your American accent, Medad is not your real name. And I said, Winkleman. And to cut the story short, he said, oh, I know why. I said, why? He said, because a Winkel in Yiddish is a corner. Okay. I said, okay. And a corner, right, is not really a point, because if you, I hope the camera gets this, if you look at a corner on the inside, it's an angle. Who uses angles? Surveyors. They survey long distances by knowing the angles. And limdod in Hebrew is to measure. So you didn't want to be called Moded, so you took the name Medad. I said, that's all wrong, but I'm going to tell my father I did not change the family name. I just moved it into Hebrew.
And now I know. It's been a long time. I've known you a while, but now I know how it all came about. How can people see your work? I mean, I would recommend going to jns.org and following your op-eds. What's the best way to reach out to you and see all the important things you're doing, whether it's your writing through the Menachem Begin Heritage Center or any of the other work you're doing on behalf of the Temple Mount, Judea and Samaria, of course?
I try as much as possible to be present on social media. So as you said, first of all, if you go to JNS and look for the opinions, you can find me going back about 6 years now. So it'll take you a couple of months to catch up on my opinions. But if you read them all, you know what I'm thinking. As you said, I'm in other newspapers. But if you go to Twitter, it's a challenge because it's like 120, 180 characters. Is sort of I don't spend money on it, you know. So if you go to Y Medad, that's my handle. And you can catch me up on Twitter. I try to make some short points there. And on Facebook. So I'm always available if you're really serious about getting in touch and following me.
Yisrael Medad, Winky, it's been an honor to have you on the show. I thank you so much. And keep up the holy, important work you're doing on behalf of Judea and Samaria and all the people of Israel. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Josh.
I want to give a shout out to our production team behind the scene, Yuri Svertsky, Zach Sickerman, Ryan Lifshitz, and our producer, Esther Eden. Make sure you tune in to all the amazing content on JNS TV, and also go to jns.org for all the latest breaking news from Israel, the Middle East, and the entire Jewish world. We'll see you next week. Have a great week, everybody.